Let's get insight from an international law expert. Joining me now here in the studio is Malcolm Hawks. He's a barrister with Doughty Street Chambers here in London. Thanks for being with us. So let's talk about from an international legal perspective here, because we have a suspected attack from that the Prime Minister is saying most likely originated in Russia on UK soil. Where does that leave us legally?
Well, there are two ways of looking at this. One, the easiest and most straightforward way is domestic British law. This was a criminal offence, attempted murder. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. The injection by the Prime Minister of the allegations was an act of the Russian state. It invokes international law, and that has a whole series of legal consequences, some more theoretical than practical. And
what are the practical ones that, in fact, could unfold here, realistically?
Realistically, I think your last speaker hit the nail on the head, really. We're looking at enhanced measures in terms of sanctions, perhaps expulsions of diplomats. The point being that if the UK wanted to, in theory, it could treat this as a Chapter 5 triggering event, because this is a hostile act of aggression by a hostile foreign power against a NATO member state.
But it's an attack on one is an attack on all, but that means NATO would have to respond to suspected Russian aggression.
Indeed, absolutely. Now, in reality, that's just not going to happen. But the Prime Minister certainly knows what she's doing, and in using such strident language, she is intending to send a very clear signal, and in some senses perhaps even a cry for help, because there hasn't been this chorus of support of the British position in the light of this attack, which has taken place some days ago now.
So what are the options, I mean, apart from the obvious ones, increased sanctions, maybe the expulsion of a few diplomats, that the UK has at its disposal?
Well, they're very limited indeed, and it's the practicality. But in international law terms, of course, Russia is a state party to the 1925 Geneva Protocol, which outlaws the use of these weapons, and their use is not permitted under any circumstances. Are there going to be consequences to that? And what I feel is she's played some fairly cute politics here, because she's forcing the Russians to come down on one side or the other. Was this an act by the Russian state, or was it a rogue element? And if it was a rogue element, then that raises very serious questions about the storage of the thousands of tons of these lethal materials they have.
It's what I was saying at the top of the hour. It's either, if you can trace it back to Russia, either the Russian state behind it, or somehow a rogue entity got its hands on very lethal chemical weapons, which is terrifying, of course. But what can you do there?
Well, Russia is not a state party to the International Criminal Court, so that limits what you can do. But, for example, there's the Interpol Red Notice scheme, and I would expect to see a number of prominent individuals added to a Red Notice request with a view to their arrest and potential extradition and prosecution.
Yeah, but it seems as though the legal avenues are limited, and even if you know, increase sanctions on Russia or throw out a few diplomats, it just seems like there are very limited tools here to respond.
There are, without...
Unless there's unity among other nations, whether it's NATO or the EU.
Yes, without escalating matters, without entering into an endgame, and we all know where that will lead. This obviously happen. Can be much more uncomfortable for the Russian state and Mr. Putin. This is a very sensitive time for Russia politically. Again, I feel that the Prime Minister was saying, we are treating this exceptionally seriously, and we will take whatever measures we can do. We all understand that those are limited by the practicalities.
Malcolm Hawks, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time on the program.